What are former President Obama and President Trump saying about UAPs and ETs? And why are 400,000 Catholics flocking to Assisi, Italy this month? I'm Ryan Geckner, and I'm here with Chris Daly.
Avi Loeb's Galileo project is looking for volunteers. How can you get involved? How did a Norwegian scientist give himself symptoms of Havana syndrome? This is Headlines from the Beyond.
So, last week was a really busy week for anybody awaiting signs of government disclosure about the existence of non-human intelligence or extraterrestrial life. This is a little bit of a saga, so we're going to go all the way back to Valentine's Day when this kind of started. So, former President Barack Obama was interviewed on Brian Taylor Cohen's podcast. And when it went live on Valentine's Day, it went viral for somewhat unexpected reasons. So during the podcast, Obama was asked the question, are aliens real? During a sort of rapid fire round of questions, to which he very quickly replied, they're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in Area 51. There's no underground facility unless there's this enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the President of the United States. So that's a statement. And later he was asked what question was the first thing he wanted answered when he became president. And his immediate reply was, where are the aliens? So
I think
I'm
that
not
had
sure
to
what
do
to say.
with I think it had to do with the fact that he had just been talking about aliens because they asked about it. Like the way the rapid fire kind of worked and the way the
Maybe.
interview was progressing, that's what it seemed like.
Sure, we'll go with that. So that, of course, blew up all over the internet with over 26 million views. Everyone, or most everyone, lots of folks were talking about it. And so he decided to come out and clarify his answer with a post all over his various social media accounts saying, quote, I was trying to stick with the spirit of the speed round, but since it's gotten attention, let me clarify. Statistically, the universe is so vast that the odds are good there's life out there. But the distances between solar systems are so great that the chances we've been visited by aliens is low, and I saw no evidence during my presidency that extraterrestrials have made contact with us. Really? End quote.
It's
So,
interesting that he felt like he had to clarify.
yeah, he
I
like
mean, that's interesting.
immediately
Yeah.
came out and clarified, or well, within 24 hours. And that's not where the story ends. So,
Right, right.
so a couple of days later, while on board Air Force One, President Trump, who anyone who pays attention to anything knows he is not Obama's best friend, was asked about this comment by a reporter and replied with, quote, well, he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that. I don't know if they're real or not, but I can tell you he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that. He made a big mistake. I don't have an opinion on it. I never talk about it. A lot of people do.
Okay,
End quote.
I call BS on President Trump not having an opinion. I think he
Yeah.
has an opinion.
Well, okay. Yeah. So there's lots of things to talk about with that statement, not the least of which is how unintelligible it is when you have to read it aloud yourself. But he did campaign on disclosing
Yes, yes.
information about UFOs and UAPs. So I find that annoying. But whatever. I mean, people make campaign promises. I'm not going to hold that against him.
Everybody
So,
breaks their campaign
yes.
promises, let's be
Yes.
honest.
So he makes this comment. This sort of goes a little viral, but not really. And then hours after, he posts on Truth Social, quote, based on the tremendous interest shown, I will be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying and releasing government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomena, and unidentified flying objects, and any and all other information connected to these highly complex but extremely interesting and important matters. And in all caps, everyone, God bless America. End quote. So this blew up. This I saw much faster than I saw Obama's comments. All over my social media, it was everyone just screenshotting this True Social post and blasting it everywhere. And so I said we have to talk about this.
Sure.
Um, now I'm not sure what we make of this. I have a couple of different thoughts, but I'll let you go first, Chris, before
Well,
we.
I mean, I I'm guardedly hopeful. I'd love to see some actual disclosure, like real disclosure where we learn new things
Hmm.
because we very rarely get new information. But let's face it, when the government puts information out there, they're not going to put information that's going to cause an uproar. They're not going to,
Right.
they're not going to give us the information we really want. And I don't think it matters who's in office when that happens. I mean, it's actually not the president usually who's releasing a lot of this stuff. It's others. And so I don't know that we're going to get anything new and interesting. I do think we'll get some more information out there, but I don't think it's going to say anything new.
Yeah, I kind of think if we're going to expect anything, it'll be a lot of the same sorts of things we've got out of the various UAP hearings and things like that. Although the last one with the collecting biologics was kind of interesting.
That
But
was interesting. Yeah.
I think, I just read Lou Elizondo's Imminent, and there was a statement in the book that he made about kind of the opinion that a lot of career DoD personnel have about presidents, and that's they are transient. Most of these career folks are in there for the long haul. They're
Right.
career government employees. Whereas the president, is there for 4, maybe 8 years. And so he doesn't come out and quite directly say it, but he says, that most presidents don't really get to find out about this kind of stuff. And so who knows?
Well,
And
plausible deniability. Think
right,
independency.
exactly. Right. Well, yeah, that's true. I also think too, like if we're gonna take a Truth Social post as any sort of official statement from a government official, which that in and of itself is a question. There's a lot of ambiguity in what he says. He
Right.
says, I'm directing them to begin the process of identifying.
Right.
He's
So, I
not
mean, how long
saying,
is that going to take?
yeah, right, exactly. I mean, we've seen how much of a cluster the Epstein files thing has been. I can't imagine that the UAP UFO stuff will be any less messy. And so I I guess I don't, not to go too much into like everything that's happening geopolitically, but I have very limited hope that this will go anywhere.
Yeah, and I guess I feel like that most of the time with anything that the government says they're going to release. I mean, there are reasons why things need to be kept secret. I don't want to pretend I'm a politician because I'm not,
Sure.
but it would be nice to get real disclosure sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's going to happen this time, but I
Yeah.
can be hopeful.
Hey, that's right. We can hope. And you'll hear it first or last.
Let's talk about St. Francis of Assisi. For the first time since 1978, the bones of St. Francis are on display in the church that bears his name. So in 1978, there was kind of a brief display,
Mm-hmm.
but now we're having, putting the bones out there and telling people to come look, and it's a big deal. So this is actually commemorating the 800th anniversary of his death. So at this point, nearly 400,000 people have already registered to review the remains. I think there will be more and more and more. I think you're going to see a ton going and seeing these remains. It's a big deal in the Catholic Church. So if you don't know who St. Francis is, he is the founder of the Franciscan monastic order, which is a big deal in Catholicism. It's actually one of the largest monastic orders. And Franciscans are the ones, they take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. A lot of people think that all Catholic priests and brothers all take vows of poverty. They don't
Mm-hmm.
actually.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting to me, but that's an aside. But
Mm-hmm.
Franciscans do. St. Francis was known for his great love of animals, the environment. He's actually the patron saint of ecology. So
Mm-hmm.
you'll see a lot of statues of him in people's gardens and things like that. But one of the things he's best known for is the stigmata. This is when you bleed from the wounds of Christ on the cross. And so he has said, I obviously was not around, 800 years
Neither,
ago,
neither of us
but
are.
he is said to have displayed the stigmata during an angelic apparition. So it's kind of a big deal. And there's not a lot of people who the church has recognized as displaying the stigmata. And this is one of them. And so that's part of the reason why he's kind of a big deal. Talk about a medical mystery.
Yeah, no kidding. Seriously.
So that's another episode entirely.
Mm-hmm.
So, in any case, the bones are on display, and this is a relic. So, in the Catholic tradition, relics are extremely important. They're divided into three different orders of relics, and this is a first order relic. So, this is bones, it's any other physical body parts, which is a little gruesome if you think about it, but we
Hmm.
won't go
Hmm.
there.
Hmm.
It could be clothing, it could be things that were tied to somebody's imprisonment or torture or execution. You know, a lot of these folks were killed for their faith, so it could be something like that. A second order is an item that was owned by the saint. So it's not tied to them in terms of like their death or anything like that, but it was owned by them. And then a third order is something that was touched to one of the other order relics. These are by far the most common, and they're not as powerful. But Catholics, respect relics, and they're actually in every Catholic church. Every Catholic altar has a relic in them. Most churches have actually quite a few relics around, but the most important one is going to be in the altar of the church. So these are incredibly important, and they are venerated by Catholics. And so the idea of being able to go and see the bones of St. Francis and potentially pray in that area or touch something to the case holding the bones, something like that, is going to be very important to a lot of Catholics, and that's why people are going there. There's actually a lot of reports of healing through interaction with relics of different kinds. Of course, the way the church interprets this is to say that it is God working through the relics, not the relics themselves. Same thing when you talk about Catholics praying to saints.
Hmm.
It's God working through the saints. It's very clear the way the
There's a
church.
lot of a lot of hand wringing that goes on in the church,
Yes, yes,
particularly
there
around
is.
things like this.
There is. But in any case, I think it's kind of interesting to watch what happens as St. Francis's bones are on display. And it is a little morbid,
Hmm.
but it's interesting to watch what happens. So,
Yeah, yeah. And there's an interesting story about like the identification of the bones because there
mm,
was some dispute about whether or not this body was actually St. Francis's for a
right,
while.
right.
And I forget which pope it was, but there was a pope that declared these are the bones after an investigation. So,
Yeah, I don't remember who did that,
yeah.
but yes, there was
Hmm.
contention, and so interesting.
Hmm.
So moving on to Avi Loeb, going back to Avi Loeb, my hero. uh, I'm really excited I was really excited to get information knowing that he is asking for help of average, everyday people. So the Galileo project is trying to, identify objects in the night sky and just in our atmosphere in general, and trying to say, like, well, what are these objects? Are these known human-made objects that are out there, satellites, etc.? Are these known astrological bodies? What are these things in the night sky? And so they're using AI to help them do that through some observatories that they've got, and they have three new observatories to as an aside, one in Massachusetts, one here in Pennsylvania,
Hmm.
and one in Nevada. And these detect objects. And so as they're looking at these objects through the observatories, they're trying to see different flight characteristics. They're trying to see what these things are and if they're different from what they already know is out there. So they're using AI to comb through everything and see if there's anything anomalous. However, AI is, after all, AI. So it needs to be trained.
Hmm.
So they're asking people to help train, which I think is really cool.
Hmm.
So they're asking anybody to help do this. And they're asking people to jump online and label objects. So they're trying to say, can you help us figure out what these things are? Because they look different depending on the time of day. And, so help us to figure this out so we can appropriately train AI. And so they're asking anyone to do this. And you can just jump on their website, and we will link to that in the show notes. But you can jump on their website and help them with this. And I think that's fantastic that,
Hmm.
maybe we can get the public engaged in this sort of thing and help us figure out, what's out there.
Yeah, I like the idea of citizen science with
Yeah,
anomalous phenomena. It's pretty cool.
I think that's awesome.
Hmm.
More reasons to like Ovilo.
Yeah, exactly. In case you didn't like him already,
Right.
we have more reasons. So, in the spirit of revisiting old topics that we've covered, we've got one last story for you that brings us back to our discussion of Havana syndrome a few weeks ago. So, recent reporting came out about a Norwegian scientist who, while trying to debunk the idea of microwave weapons, built and tested a device on himself and suffered symptoms eerily similar to cases of Havana syndrome. In the category of things I would not recommend. um, Apparently, this happened back in 2024, but only now has come to light. But the scientist, whose name we don't know and whose organization he worked for still remains classified, um, created this device, turned it on himself, and then had a really bad time. To the point where the Pentagon and the White House sent officials to visit Norway at two separate points to investigate this case. Now, what's interesting about this, if you've been following along with our reporting on Havana syndrome, is that this comes after news last month that the Pentagon purchased a similar device. This was not the device that they purchased, as well as the death of Michael Beck, which this is news to me, was an NSA employee and the first to report symptoms of Havana syndrome back in 1996. So that's a full 20 years before
Yeah,
any of
it's
us
been a minute.
really started talking about it.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. This new reporting dug up some new findings, or not really new findings, but the fact that the device that was purchased during the Biden administration is still still unknown to the Department of Defense who built it. Still figuring that out. And that there's also still lots of government speculation about whether these anomalous health incidents are actually the result of foreign adversaries. So we'll keep an eye on this story and see if anything new comes out of Havana syndrome. I think as much as we've talked about it, maybe we should do an episode about it.
We probably should,
Probably should.
going down those
Yes, yeah,
medical paths.
exactly. Since everybody likes those stories.
Yeah, so we'll
So,
we'll do Havana syndrome. We can do stigmata. There's a bunch out there.
yeah, yeah, there's a lot. Well, we'll continue following the stories of the strange and the uncanny. Thank you for joining us. This has been Headlines from the Beyond.